Welcome everyone to the latest of Capalino's Future of New York series. My name is Travis Terry, and I have the pleasure of being both the president of Capalino and host for today's event with my good friend Jason Clark, who is the executive director of TechNYC. Today's discussion is an important one, as we're going to focus on the role of that technology is going to play in the future of our great city and region. I just have to say it's an encouraging time. Very encouraged most recently with the leadership and the interest in the industry shown by our new mayor, Eric Adams, and particularly with his announcements of significant investments, the change in organizational structure, and all his policy recommendations. So it's a very encouraging time for the technology sector. As you may know, the Future of New York series is our firm's effort to bring in experts to really explore complicated topics about how to ensure our city and our region's success. The purpose is to give our friends, clients, colleagues the information they need to enable their success and support efforts to help those most in need in our city so that our city can grow equitably and effectively. Over the last year or so, we've covered topics such as entering the New York City market, climate change and its potential impact to New York, politics, or if we have to do politics, cannabis, hot topic these days, the hospitality and restaurant industry, sustainable development, nonprofit management, inclusive economic growth, tourism, and urban planning. If you haven't already and you have some time, I suggest you go to our website, and every episode of our Future of New York series is on there at capalino.com in the Insights section. So today's topic, the role of technology in the future of New York, is a subject that is near and dear to our hearts at Capalino. By combining our expertise in lobbying, strategy, and finance, our team and our technology industry group works closely with everyone from Fortune 500 companies to small technology-based nonprofits. This team, which is led by my esteemed colleague, our managing director and former IBM executive, Michael Boyle, advises on everything from procurement to financing to legislative advocacy and general business growth. In fact, I just want to shout out Michael's really interesting blog piece on cybersecurity entitled Protecting New York's Critical Infrastructure. All right, with that shameless plug out of the way, sorry, I always like to highlight my colleagues because they're brilliant minds and I like to show them off. Let's turn to today's program. It is a good one. Let me tell you, the force is with us today with Jason here. Sorry, I got to make Star Wars jokes. I could hear my staff groaning and I could see my kids rolling their eyes, but I got to do it. Very quickly, Jason was recently named as the executive director of TechNYC earlier this year. Prior to that, Jason was a partner at Hamilton Clark LLP, where he helped tech startups in the criminal justice space achieve their regulatory compliance and strategic goals. He's also the founder of a very cool organization called Dream Chasers, which is a free tutoring and mentoring program that uses digital and online learning to narrow the achievement gap to help students from low-income, underrepresented backgrounds prepare for New York City's specialized healthcare exam. Very cool. I should just also note that Jason and I are kindred spirits in some ways. We're both from living in Queens. We both, I think, share the same favorite book, The People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn, if I remember correctly, which changed my whole life. That's a whole other webinar. Jason, it's
in fact, just to quickly jump in, if you ever want to see something similar, you should check out Iron's the law history of people's history and the law of the United States.
Oh, cool. I'm definitely gonna do that. Definitely. Jason, it's an honor to have you. And just before we start, a quick housekeeping note. Jason and I are gonna chat for about 40 minutes and then take questions from the audience. There is a Q&A button, I believe, at the bottom of your screen. So if you have a question in there, feel free to ask it, and we will get to it as we get later on in the program. I do also just want to acknowledge, I talked about the efforts of the city. We're going to get into that a little bit, but my understanding also is that the Chief of Staff to the Mayor, Frank Carone, is on, and I just want to welcome him, thank him for his time and everything he and the administration is doing in this area. It's a big deal, and it's so important, as you'll learn from today. So let's get into it. Jason, if you don't mind, I think maybe a great place to start is if you could tell us and our audience a little bit about TechNYC, what you guys are up to these days. It's a phenomenal organization. I strongly recommend people join it. And I have to admit, I spent some time on your website, and I love the fact that you have a director of treats, Daisy, Daly,
Bonnie.
for
Oh,
the
you know, we
four-legged.
probably have to update it. So
Yeah.
Taylor, I think, was Julie's dog, and
Got it.
now Sarah's dog, Bonnie, has actually assumed the role. So yes, but yes, we do have a director
That's great.
Of treats up there.
That's great. I suspect I will have a number of emails in my inbox after this from my staff asking for our own four-legged employee. But Jason, great to have you. Why don't tell us a little bit more about TechNYC and all the great things you guys have accomplished.
Sure. Yeah. So TechNYC is an organization aimed at building a dynamic and vibrant tech ecosystem here in New York City. And it's made up, well, let me start by saying this. It started about 6 years ago with just 5-member companies, with my predecessor, Julie Samuels, and our board chair, Fred Wilson, who somehow in such a short amount of time we've been able to build it from, again, a organization started with just 5 companies to over 800 throughout the New York City area. And the idea behind it is that we want to be able to build a tech ecosystem here that allows companies, legacy companies, allows startups, allows companies that have a significant number of tech jobs there to be able to really grow and be successful here. And you know, we're very proud of the fact that many of our members have done some really amazing things. You know, when we're talking about, you know, some of these social issues, when it comes to figuring out ways that, you know, we could get through the pandemic, and has really been a pretty critical role, I think, in being able to have that connective tissue between, you know, what the city and state are doing, and figuring out ways that, you know, we can build out a tech ecosystem that not just grows for growing's sake, but one that is fair and equitable, and allows folks from all walks of life to be able to get into, be a member of the tech community.
That's great. I mean, thank you for doing that, man. I think when you see the growth of New York City, so much of that is related to the growth of the tech industry. So
Sure.
let me start off with this question. Is New York City the best place for tech companies to come? I know we're constantly competing globally. We're competing with Silicon Valley. My understanding is that Silicon Valley is still outpacing us a little bit on investments, although it seems like the speed at which our investment in technology companies is escalating quicker. But I was curious to get, like, what is so great about New York City? Why tech companies and those companies that rely on tech should be here?
Yeah. Well, to answer your question, in my very unbiased opinion, I think New York is the best place to have a tech company here. But I think what it is, you know, you look at most of the data that's been out there, some of the reports, you know, New York is consistently coming in right behind Silicon Valley as, you know, the largest and most promising place to be able to have a tech company here. And I think there are a few reasons to that. You know, some things that make it different than, let's say, a Boston or a Silicon Valley or a London or what have you. And I think that these are things that make me very bullish about where we're going and what the potential is, you know, moving forward. So the first is that here in New York City, it's not just a tech industry that's here. You know, there is a booming, you know, for many years, you know, New York has been the home to, you know, the top real estate industry here. You know, when you talk about healthcare, when you talk about finance, when you talk about fashion and media, there are all these areas that is just a natural culture for folks and for tech, I think, to be able to grow. And that's because the industry itself isn't necessarily just a vertical, but in a lot of ways it's a horizontal. It's a way of being able to build off of other industries that are already doing well, so that folks who are speaking with someone in health, you know, probably found out, like, hey, you know, especially during the pandemic, it would be great if we could figure out ways that we can be able to use, you know, improve our telehealth systems out here, right? Or folks who are thinking about it when it comes to real estate and prop tech, or some of the things that it can do to make those industries stronger. So I think that the diversity of industries is probably one of the things that definitely makes New York. I would also probably say, the tech scene in New York is definitely, it's newer when you compare it to some of the other spaces. And I think you can see that in just the amount of growth that we've seen over the last 10, 5, hell, even during the pandemic. And I think that what we're starting to see is, I think historically, tech was really an add-on to other mainstream industries here. So if you're talking about, advertising, or if you're talking about commerce or business, they have tech, bureaus or tech, infrastructures that are in part of those companies. But I think that now what you're starting to see is that there are way more startups that are out here. And that's because folks are coming, I think, from some of the larger companies and going out on their own and being able to build their own thing. And I think that that's something that we've seen in some of these other areas, which naturally starts to be able to, explode more growth here. And I think that if there's one thing the pandemic did, is it really put a premium on innovation. And coming out of this, that coupled with the fact that there's all these VC dollars that are being invested here now, coupled with the fact that New York has a certain level of diversity that also breeds more innovation or thinking about things differently, that I think is, will really make a difference. I'm really bullish on where we're going to be 5, 10, 20 years from now. And those are things I think that are really going to continue to make New York a place where, tech is going to thrive for a long time.
Yeah, those are really good points. Jason, one of the things also too and by the way, the other thing I would just add to the list of all the great things in New York too is we are the capital for international affairs. We have
right.
UN. So all of that, tech is becomes such a global marketplace that all of that is centered in New York, not just in Manhattan, I should say, but all over the place. And we have people from all over the world living here.
Yeah, and we didn't even talk about food or what have you. I mean, there are so many different ways that people have great ideas out there that can really be able to do something and find, folks who are in those spaces here. So, again, there's just a lot of reasons to think that New York, we've done some great things, I think, in the last couple of years, but there's no reason to think that, like our best days aren't, 2, 3 times, what we are even seeing today.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems like, and I'm curious to get your opinion on this, just kind of as a follow-up, it seems like there's now a real interest and effort in investing in MWBE companies and making sure that they're ultimately part of the ecosystem of technology, and whatever industry they're in, that they could play a part of this overall growth. I'm curious to get your take on that too.
Yeah, definitely.
First
of all, I'm sorry?
I was going to say smaller companies. It's not just the big Facebooks and Microsofts and Amazons of the world. It's everything in between. Yeah.
And, first of all, I think when we're talking about MWBEs, there's a lot of work that, has been done. I think when it talks about VC dollars, the amount that has gone to Black founders in particular has multiplied by 4. So it's 4 times what it was even just 1 or 2 years ago. Sad thing about that is that has brought it up to 2%. So that still means that there's a lot of work that we need to be able to do here. But it does show that there's so much that, we can do. And I think that, there are certain efforts that are being done by folks such as Google. They had created something, the Google Black Founders, which has done some really terrific things in making sure folks have opportunity to get seed money. There's a terrific program that TechNYC partnered with Cornell Tech, called New York City Recovery Challenge, where many of the folks who are part of this cohort came from diverse backgrounds and thinking of innovative ways to be able to tackle issues that impact all New Yorkers. But I definitely think from a lot of the conversation I've had, I think the first is really figuring out ways to be able to bring access to funding, because there's no shortage of ideas out there that I think can really be able to do things. But if someone can't be able to achieve their minimum viable product number, then it's going to be difficult to be able to put together a pitch out there, to the right folks out there. And then also figuring out ways to be able to be in the room. One of the things that you see if you look at, Silicon Valley or in London is, there's this huge growth that have come from folks that were part of, Google when it just got started. And then they went out and they started their own companies here. But a lot of it is like, how can we be able to have that same type of structure where folks are able to build out of some of the larger tech companies that are based here in New York, and then be able to use those skills to be able to do things, in some of these other areas. But to do that, we got to figure out ways to have more people of color that are getting in the door in some of these spaces as well. So I think that, the dollars comes to it, the opportunities when it comes to jobs, and then figuring out ways, I think when you're talking about MWBEs, to be able to get registered. There are a lot of folks who have talked about the challenges of going through it. I know that, in a different life, when I was with a group that was registering as an MWBE, you had to be able to show, like, on your birth certificate where it says, that, you're African American. If it wasn't there, you had to go to your parents. And if that, you have to go to your grandparents. And one of my partners, he was adopted, right? And he didn't have that. And so there's some of these things I think that are a good intention, but I think we have to figure out a way to kind of streamline it. And then after that, make sure that some of the companies that they may be doing business with are making a priority of ensuring that X amount of this work is going to go to MWBE so that they can be able to get that start and then be able to spin off and be able to do some of their own work.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, there's just so much untapped potential with these companies that could just help the economy grow so much quicker and so much more favorably. Want to turn our attention a little bit to workforce. So much of what you hear from companies, and the reason why they like New York is there's a lot of smart people here. And I know that I saw TechNYC release a survey of tech workers last year, which was kind of interesting because it was in the middle of COVID. That the tech industry is growing with about 46,000 new jobs added in the high tech area between 2008 and 2018. Just curious to get your thoughts of, like, we spent a lot of time sort of thinking about the public sector, right? And I would love to get your comments on that. Like, what more could the public sector? But what else could, we have a lot of folks on the audience, and who will probably watch us later, who run businesses. And what more could businesses be doing to create more tech jobs, to recruit better from New York? And in particular, just getting back to your last point, like, particularly to do that and recruit women and people of color and those, living in NYCHA or at CUNY, et cetera. Like, what are your thoughts on kind of the workforce development piece of all this?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that I think can, and should be done, in this space. I mean, if there's one thing I'm seeing when I've been meeting with some of our members is, the large majority, they are looking to grow. They have openings that are available, right? But it's about making sure people have the, that we're doing a good job of being able to make sure that we have folks who have the skills needed to be able to come in, right? So in one sense, I think we need to do more that has to do with investing in bridge programs. Figuring out ways, that, folks who are interested in getting into tech can be able to learn some of the basic skills that are needed so that if they are able to get an opportunity, the employer can be able to help with being able to build the skills from that point. I think another part of that, and kind of in the same vein, is that, we need to invest more when it comes to apprenticeships. There's a really nice stat from COF, the Center of Urban Future, which indicates that over the last few years, when we're talking about apprenticeship programs, 90% of them are in, construction and building trades, but very few of them are in, I guess, just about 10% are in professional services. And then when we talk about tech, I think there are about 14 of them that are registered, but only 2 of them are out here in New York City, right? So if we can figure out ways to be able to build out those programs and be able to expand it more, because we know the jobs are here. They're very clearly there when we're talking about cybersecurity, when we're talking about data analytics, all of these things out here, there are opportunities, but we need to make sure that we're having that first component. And I guess one thing I'll say, to go back, I guess, to maybe the long-term answer, is really making sure that we're doing more to increase access and understanding about, computer science and, tech at earlier stages. Today is actually the day that TechNYC is announcing the launch of our Tech Year program. And
cool.
Tech Year is a program. Thank you very much. And in fact, as a nice shameless plug, I will see if I can put it in the chat. There we go.
Yeah,
Right
please.
there. And one of the things that we're doing with Tech here is that we're folding this into the summer youth education program from the city, making sure, our aim is to get at least 100 of our member companies to participate. And, we're going to make sure that there are internship programs available to folks to be able to get that first sense of career, like exploration and readiness, to be able to work at a tech company. There is a really interesting stat from a conference that I was in earlier today that Accenture put on, where one of the panelists had indicated, and they were talking about, I think it was breakthrough tech or breakthrough innovation, and they had these they call it sprinternships, right? And it's a 3-week program, but what they were saying is that folks who participate in that one year, the next year it's 55% more likely to be able to get an internship, at a tech company, and it moves on. And I know that with Tech Year, one of the things we're going to do is make sure people have that original opportunity to be able to get in the door here. And hopefully that'll lead to other internships, and then figure out ways that we could continue to do this during the year as well. So I think there's a lot of ways, the one I'm talking about now is something that, doesn't happen overnight. But the thinking is that if you put the time in now and you start to develop, if we figure out ways that we can be able to partner and collaborate with CUNY and their programming, they have over 15,000 individuals who are computer science majors today, right? How do we figure out ways to really be able to empower and equip that next generation of folks so that we can be able to essentially be that pipeline to the pipeline?
Yeah. Yeah, and someone told me, and this relates to us being Queens guys, is that Queens College graduates the most computer science kids in computer science of any school in the city of New York, which I found fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
It's great to hear.
Yeah, and there are so many academic institutions that out here. I know Thomas Gretsch with the chamber over there is doing some terrific things with the Queens Tech Council. So the thing is, there are. What's that?
I'm a member of that too. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
He's doing some great stuff.
So there are some really good examples, but to me, at the end of the day, it's a fact that, there are folks who are interested and are looking for these type of jobs. We have companies and businesses that need these jobs. We should be able to figure out a way to be able to bridge that gap so they can get from there to here. And it just really talks about being intentional. Again, I like the fact that, as you mentioned about the mayor, that, city government has made this commitment to try to have 100,000 jobs with SYEP. And I know from our vantage point, if we can make sure that folks are being able to get into tech in these spaces, then that leads to, more opportunities in the future.
Yep. All really great points. And you named, I'll just shout them out, two wonderful institutions, both the Center for Urban Future and Cornell Tech. I'm a Cornell grad, so I'm always happy to hear good things about Cornell, what Cornell is doing. So
Big red.
It's great that they're involved. Let's talk about the pandemic for a second. So much changed, right? We learned so much. I was just curious if you could talk a little bit about what are some of the lessons from a tech perspective that you want to share, we should take into consideration.
Yeah. It's interesting, and it's actually one of the reasons why I was really curious and in some ways excited about this role with TechNYC. I think the fact, as we were saying before, that we have a mayor and administration throughout the campaign was talking about tech, and we have a governor who has been very upfront about making sure that we want to invest in businesses. And I think, to your point here, because of this pandemic, one way or another, it's fundamentally changed the relationship that folks have with technology. The fact that, and I think we've had some of these conversations before, the fact that nowadays it is way much easier for you to be able to speak with a physician, to be able to put together a telehealth appointment. We talk about the way that, we're having this meeting as a, over Zoom. And even though video conferencing has been here for years, it wasn't widespreadly used the way it is now, where you can have as many folks who are signing on, the way it is now. And what I really feel about the pandemic is that it required us to figure out in a very short amount of time, figure out ways to be able to find innovative solutions to making sure people can be able to protect themselves, protect their families, but also figure out ways that they can be able to do many of the functions that you need in your office or the needs that you have during your daily life. And I think it's because of that it's actually really expedited, I think, the growth, especially here in New York in the tech sector, where we have all these startups that are out there. I think they're on the venture capital side. Folks are starting to realize that there is a need here, so that people are investing more money here. Like it was about 2 years ago, like the VC numbers in New York was somewhere like around 20 billion, and literally last year it jumped to over $50 billion that are being invested in different tech companies out here right now, right? So if there's something that I'd really say about the pandemic, it's, I think accelerated the maturation process of tech here in New York City. But what I also think it does, and this may also just be the optimist in myself, but I feel like it's really, made people feel again that, to whatever challenges people are dealing with, like there is a solution. There is a way that we can be able to innovate our way out of all types of issues, all types of challenges that we're dealing with. And I'm really bullish about, coming out of this pandemic, what this is going to lead for tech, but also all the other industries, anywhere that, we're going to be innovating.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's just amazing. I mean, just the way in which tech has advanced so many of these industries, especially healthcare,
right,
has been remarkable and helpful in a lot of ways. Saves a lot of time not having to go to your doctor's office for every little thing.
Exactly. And even just some of the things that you needed to do where, it was so difficult to be able to get, your records from, this department or this facility to another facility. Like you had to figure out ways to be able to, collaborate those into a portfolio, which in a lot of ways I think is probably some of the genesis for, my city that, Matt Frazier and the chief technology officer is implementing. And to the extent that we can figure out ways that we can be able to group that data, it's going to be way easier to be able to see different trends out there and then be able to figure out where we can be best deploy like our options and our resources in different types of ways. So there's just so much that can be done here. And, again, it's really just up to us to innovate and apply it moving forward.
Yeah. Yes. Staying on that topic a little bit, because I do think that the mayor's talked a lot about one central portal for people to access city services and a sort of customer friendly approach by utilizing technology to make people's lives better. I mean, ultimately it comes down to quality of life. And I was just curious to hear your thoughts and kind of where TechNYC is on the role of technology in addressing real social issues. Things like homelessness, access to housing, and access to, social programs, dealing with food insecurity, things of that nature, and how you kind of see all that ultimately playing
out. Oh, I think there's a tremendous opportunity there. For me, you started talking a little bit about it, like my career started off, as an attorney. And, I became an attorney because I wanted to figure out ways that you could be able to law to, positively impact people's lives. And a lot of what actually really drew me to this time with tech is like those same things that actually made me want to go to law school are the reasons, why I wanted to be able to be here, because there is such an amazing opportunity here. Like, we were at caucus weekend, I guess a month or so ago, and we had this whole panel, and we're actually looking at tech actually as a civil rights issue, right? So the way that tech can be used when it comes to being able to improve educational opportunities, the way that tech can be used when it comes to economic justice and economic mobility, the way tech can be used to be able to figure out innovative solutions when we're talking about, transit deserts, or the way you could be able to group like the benefits that you get from the city, or figuring out answers to things such as food insecurity or housing. I know that, when we're talking about, let's say, homelessness, there is this this terrific company, an app that was started called Street Smart. And the whole idea is that they realized there are all these individuals that are going out and doing some really amazing things when it comes to trying to help the homeless. But obviously, you know, it was hard to be able to gather, like people would have their own materials. But, you know, the same way, you know, in some of these other apps, or let's say, I don't know, what'd be a good one? Let's say something like Waze, right? You know, where,
Right.
you know, everyone collectively may put in information about, let's say there's an accident here or there, and it's allowed to be able to figure out, you know, what's the best route for you. They were doing that same thing when it comes to homelessness. So they were figuring out people who are doing this work, they would put in their own information into this large portal so that people can be able to start to see trends or figure out answers to someone who may have been in this facility, but may be in another facility. You know,
Mhm.
likewise, when we're talking about things when it comes to food insecurity, and I think this goes to some of the issues when it comes to ESG, people are
Yeah.
thinking and currently, like today, doing some really is amazing things about ways to be able to grow produce, grow you know, healthy produce, you know, in ways that, you know, I would never even thought of. Like I was having a conversation with one person who was talking about how, you know, 10 years from now, they are promising me that, you know, we will be able to make a steak without actually having the cow. And you'll be able to actually put, you know, certain
Is
types
that
of
3D
vitamins in
printing?
there. Yeah, I know, exactly. You know, all of these things. So it's really a brave new world out of, you know, just what's out there. And what I've always thought, you know, again, you know, as we're saying, you know, obviously there are things, you know, we can think about it. And we've seen some of it when it comes to education. You know, I like to be a figure always when you're talking about it. When it comes to housing, what I really like to see is if there's a way that we can be able to partner or look at some of the community boards out there that have all these are often making neighborhood assessment
Yeah.
needs assessments, right? And then being able to see which one of those are people already having, you know, people can be able to help with today, and which are some of these that maybe someone already has an answer to and already has that actual technology, and then we can figure out ways to be able to help it. And I guess the last thing I'll say to that, and I did start to talk about this before, but when I was talking about the New York City Recovery Challenge, I mean, there are people who are specifically doing this thing. Like there was someone who was creating a platform to help the underbanked be able to get loans in these spaces. You know, someone who was
Mm.
helping differently abled folks be able to, you know, help with their job readiness. There's someone who created something called Dollar Ride because his family, he comes from a family that has dollar vans, and figured out ways that you can be able to make the best route out there. Like people try to think of solutions to issues that they see right in front of them. And I think that if we're intentional, you know, about the ways that we
Right.
invest in those type of ideas out there, is there's so many ways that we can make sure that we're improving the lives of just folks, you know, like you, myself, and you know, everybody, you know, in this wonderful city of ours.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. Is there so on our audience, right? And one of the things we always try to do with these discussions is to give people we're getting a lot of information today, but also give people direction on where they can go to help. And if if they want to help, because we have a combination of people who I'm sure who are investors, business owners, and nonprofit leaders. Is there should they email you? I mean, where can they find out about all this good stuff going on so that people could either apply or support or really kind of help these new technologies that are really digging into these social needs?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's certainly the first answer. You know, Tech NYC, you know, I am
You might get a lot of emails on your inbox by
that's fine. That's fine. But
the
and it is Jason at technyc.org. So we'll make it even easier. But I want everyone, I think even like, you know, when we were speaking before, like I would love to hear everyone's great ideas and then figure out a way that something like a group like Tech NYC can be able to help, whether it's someone who has a great idea for a business, they need to be connected with folks who may be interested in funding, or folks, you know, who want to be able to do more work or figure out ways that they can be able to invest their dollars, whether it's in an impact fund or whether it's just you know, other ideas or creative things that are going on, like in the crypto space or in blockchain or all these different, you know, emerging industries out there. So feel free to, you know, bring them this way because, you know, especially, you know, I've been on in this role for, I guess, almost 3 months now.
Yeah.
And a big part of what I've been thinking about is just trying to figure out what is the best way that we can have the biggest impact. First, I think as New York, I mean, I think this is something that my predecessor, Julie, would always say, which I 100% agree with, is that, in the tech industry, tech workers are New Yorkers first, they're tech workers second. So what are the things that we can be able to be the best civic servants that we can for New York? But then second, what are the ways that we can be able to help build out a tech ecosystem, and one that reflects, I think, the values of New Yorkers, and makes, New York, as we're starting off this conversation, the best place to start a tech company.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I have the pleasure of serving on the New York board of an organization called Power My Learning, and I got attracted to it all because as a parent, and I have a couple school kids, public school, et cetera, the power of technology to create a better experience so that the parents and the teachers and the students are connected, because we're all sort of in the educational world together. And it is a partnership between a student, a parent, and a teacher to make things flow. And it's just extraordinary what technology could accomplish in just connecting people and providing information.
And in fact, actually, even to that point, I was just going to say that, there's, because of this pandemic, and obviously people had to figure out, one of the things people had to try to find solutions is how they're going to make sure that their kids are still learning, right? And it spawns all these ideas, all these startups who are thinking of innovative ways to be able to tackle that. And, sure, I think there's one thing that we definitely learned, there's never going to be a solution to being actually in the classroom. But I think that, there are all these terrific ideas out there about how we can be able to, bolster, what it is, or figure out ways to be able to help students with learning in areas that they may be having challenges with. So all these ideas, just like you're saying, are, there for the taking.
Jason, you're trying to save the world. It's incredible. Let's a big hot topic today too that I have to ask you about is cybersecurity. Every day it feels like we hear, people getting hacked and, systems being shut down. We're all constantly getting these sort of scams and spam and all that type of stuff. Are we doing enough? Is there more we could do? What do you sort of advise on all this, or sort of see it, even as an industry?
Yes, no, there's definitely more that we can and we should be doing when it comes to cybersecurity. I was very encouraged when folks are saying that we're going to invest more. I think especially from a government side in the cybersecurity space. And I think that especially as we start to see as there are geopolitical disruptions like we're seeing, with Russia and Ukraine, and the fact that, folks may try to hack, our infrastructures. I mean, imagine what that can do if someone is able to affect, like our transit system in some type of way, or like all the technologies that help our city and our state to be able to run that we don't always necessarily think are really powered, by technology. So there is definitely a lot. And I am happy to say that, at least from the conversations I've had and what I've seen, from the governor as well as the chief technology officer and all these spaces, that people seem to recognize this and recognize, especially at this particular moment, that, we need to be able to invest more in this space. So that's good. I think the second thing is that, especially just from a business standpoint, the more that businesses have their data and have their confidential information that allows them to be able to function at a high level, there are going to be folks out there who are going to, figure out ways that, they can attack, these cyber attackers who will be trying to get that data, and then figure out ways that they can use it themselves, figure out ways that they can be able to hack into your financial information, figure out ways that, they can be able to sell that to other folks. And, in a previous life, I also, worked at the New York State Attorney General's office, and a whole lot of what we would see is just the type of attacks that we'd see either on businesses or individuals, to be able to get their private information. So the short answer is, yes, I think people are aware of that, but I mean, good thing is that people seem to be wanting to do more. And I will say, even as we're talking about some of these other conversations, there is just a whole need for folks to be able to get in this space. The
Right.
last couple of years, the sub industry that's seen the most growth, there's the most need for folks to be able to get in, is in cybersecurity. And the thing about it too is that yes, there are certain positions where it is helpful to know how to code or know some of the finer points of computer science, but you don't always need to be a technical wizard or technologist in these ways to be able to get in these spaces. So when it comes to creating more jobs, this is a great space. But when it comes to cybersecurity, just generally, there's just a lot that, we're going to have to do. And what I'd also say too is that, just even in some of the research that we've been doing, we've looked at some of the companies that have been raising the most in their different rounds. A lot of them
Mhm.
are in the cybersecurity space. So if you're
Oh,
interested in investing in some companies that are doing that, there's some who are taking, who are definitely thinking about these things and creative solutions in this space. But yeah, this is definitely something that, really has to, and fortunately does seem like it's being prioritized.
yeah, yeah. And I was reading also that I think the governor put in $61.9 million in cybersecurity infrastructure and created a
I know that's a lot.
that's a lot of money,
Yeah.
and created, of course, thankfully in New York and Brooklyn, a joint security operations center to protect the state. So, this is clearly on the top of the minds of everybody and policymakers, which is huge. And like you said, it's going to create a big industry, and and hopefully we'll see a lot of startups, particularly MWBEs that are getting into that
Mhm.
and can make a real move as a tremendous job creation and protection.
Yeah, and the good thing too is I think with some of the funding that's being funneled from the federal government to the state, I think that's part of how we're able to have those allocations there. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done with just being able to build brick and mortar, but like there's a lot that needs to be going into updating some of these systems that just haven't been updated for a long time. And actually, even just as an anecdotal thing to that point, I had when I was at the Attorney General's office, I can never forget the fact that they still had a steno pool, and that's from people who would dictate, their briefs, and it had been actually in circulation as recently as like 1985, right? But I always just use that as an idea, or at least as an example, that there are all these systems that we don't even think about. I think especially in government that need to be upgraded. And fortunately, I do think in the last couple of years and in certain offices, like the AG's office, there were some significant upgrades that happened to coincidentally happen right before the pandemic, which allowed people to be able to do things more remotely. Like I was actually more surprised that we didn't hear about more challenges when it comes to some of our government agencies where the data is being stolen more than we actually did, because a lot of times when you think about government, you're thinking about not always having access to the most up-to-date technology or resources to begin with, right? But even just in those moments, we start to see the value that a lot of the systems that I think we needed to operate when the pandemic just started were able to continue to do so because some of those investments were there. Now, some of that is because I also think we got lucky, right? But I think that we shouldn't think of the luck as something that will always be there. We still need to figure out ways that we continue to update, these systems and figure out ways that we can be able to ensure that when we're talking about cybersecurity, when we're talking about infrastructure, when we're talking about all these issues, that the resources in place so that folks are protected.
Yeah, I know a very smart person once told me that hope is not a strategy.
That's true.
You gotta
That
make
is
the
true. Yeah.
right investments. And someone was also telling me that there are systems that we rely on that are built in COBOL, which apparently doesn't, like, there's very few COBOL coders still around. So,
That's
and
true.
apparently they make tons of money because they're necessary. But very interesting. So I'm going to turn Jason a little bit over to audience questions, getting some good ones. One of them is, will New York City create a tech area in the city like we have a fashion district or Wall Street or something like that? You think we're
So
on
are
site?
we interpreting that as like an actual physical location, or are we talking about like as a like an innovation district? I guess what are your
I think it
thoughts?
could be anything. I think it's just, do we want to create a physical present geographic area for tech,
Yeah, I mean,
for tech companies?
well, the interesting thing is that especially when tech got started, a lot of it actually happens, kind of in the, Union Square, area. And actually, if you look at it, where many of the startups, a lot of them tend to be in, Soho and the Flatiron district. Interestingly, there's also a lot of data showing that aside from Manhattan, Brooklyn in particular is an area where there's a whole lot of innovation that's going on. And in some ways, I would look at the Navy Yard as a terrific example as to whereby putting businesses together, you're able to really impact and increase the growth of technology. So it's an interesting question because in one sense, yes, you have people, who are like-minded, working together, you can really be able to see things develop. But at the same time, I do think that what makes New York unique, as I guess as we were saying before, is that we have all these different industries that are already doing so well. So in some ways, I kind of feel that the the spread outedness, I guess, to create a word, actually allows for growth to happen differently. But even to that point, I will say, there's some great work, for example, that Andrew Riche is doing with creating something called Civic Hall that's going to be in Union Square area as well, which in a lot of ways is going to be, it's this new building that's going to be tech oriented, jobs oriented and STEAM, abilities. But actually, I guess to answer that question, what I think where we could do more.
Just not to cut you off, but we love that project too. It was one of the projects we had the pleasure of working on, and Robert Levine and his team did a great job on it. And kudos to Andrew and everybody else for their vision, because those are the type of things that matter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thank you for that. And I think maybe what the answer is, how do we figure out ways that there are more civic halls? So that we have it like in Union Square, and that can kind of be a beacon for innovation and development or what have you. But how can we figure out a way that we can have a similar STEAM center that's in the Bronx, or a similar STEAM center in some areas in Queens, or STEAM center like in, like we have in Brooklyn, and all over. So yes, let's figure out, certain lightning rods where people kind of come to kind of convene. But let's also remember that the fact that, tech is building in all these different areas throughout the city as one of the things that makes, I think, tech in New York, pretty unique.
I think you're so right. I mean, I think is where, so much of New York City was planned around this sort of hub and spoke idea, right? Where Manhattan's the hub and people are supposed to go to work in Manhattan but live outside. And that's changed. And COVID sort of threw a whole light on that, where Queens, Bronx, Staten Island, Brooklyn, they all should have multiple live, work, play areas. And I think you're spot on that it's might not be like a central district, but has to be sprinkled around the city. And that is what will create such economic opportunity, and do it in a fair and honest way as we continue to realize the power of what's going on in Queens. And we're going to work in blended work environments rather than going to an office. So this is going to be sort of interesting, as long as, and it's important as the city and all of us sort of evolve these neighborhoods to take tech and innovation into that, and how could we evolve, particularly these, in these startup businesses.
Mm-hmm.
There's a question in here which I still will never understand, but I'm going to ask you about it. Is cryptocurrency?
Sure.
Where do you see us? Where do you see this all heading? Where do you? Where's this? What's the city's role in this? Is it?
Well,
is it going to be a constant roller coaster?
I'm sorry, what?
Is it going to be a constant roller coaster where one day you're a billionaire, next day you're broke?
Probably. I mean, I think at some point, it's just like anything else, when we're going into like a new frontier, there's a lot of trial and error, right? And because of that, you'll start to see things, succeed tremendously and others fail miserably, until we start to figure out like a baseline as we start to see some of the rules and how these things work. I do think when it comes to crypto and blockchain, there's some really interesting opportunities that are there for us. Just over the last 5 years, the number of crypto companies in New York has increased 240%. And when we look at the fact that New York is, already the financial capital of the world, there's a natural symbiotic relationship that I think that this can have. And I think that what to me is also very interesting is that there are some interesting applications that that this can have, especially like in underbanked communities. The fact that if you have to be able to send money from one person, let's say, you have family that's in, I don't know, in South Asia, and you have to send money. I mean, there are all these, prohibitive fees sometimes, significantly high that you have to, be able to use. But imagine if there's a quicker, more efficient way you can be able to do that. Or let's say I always keep thinking about the fact that during the pandemic, there are certain communities that couldn't get access to funding in the beginning because they couldn't get a PPE loan, and they didn't because they didn't have a relationship with their banks. Now, think about the ways that, maybe we could be able to figure out ways to get around that. I think that, as I was starting to say, there are some things I think still need to be figured out, and anyone who tells you they have it all figured out is probably lying. But there are some really, really, terrific opportunities I think out there if we can figure out a way to kind of, be able to, take out some of the, I think, guesswork and figure out some like, consistencies, which again just comes from time and sadly in some cases some trial and error. But I think that especially in New York, there's some great opportunities. What I will say though is that if we want to make sure that we're continuing to encourage crypto and blockchain businesses to be here in New York, we have to make it as figure out ways that we have the right protections, but at the same time not unintentionally impede growth. And a lot of what we've seen sometimes, like for example, with the bit license that was created, I think that it's terrific that there is there are certain ways to make sure that there are certain protections there for folks. But we've heard stories where it's taken like over 3 years, or there was someone I was just speaking to who had applied and they're still waiting. It's been over a year and a half. And as we see other cities and other tech sectors, for example, like Miami, who are saying like, please come down here and have an infrastructure that makes it a little bit more accommodating. We just want to make sure that we have the right protections in place, but that we aren't, unintentionally deterring folks from being able to get involved in, some really exciting opportunities that could be here for New Yorkers.
Yeah, point. I know we're getting low on time, but I did want to, there's a few questions about immigration. And I just wanted to get, because a lot of tech workers are immigrants, and there's been a fair amount of effort by leaders in the tech field to frankly modernize immigration rules and laws. And I was just curious to get your sort of take on all this stuff. Are there things that should be done, things we should be doing to address some of these issues?
So when it comes to, I'm sorry, so I think I was losing in a connection for a second, but you're saying when it comes to immigration and modernizing laws as it relates to
just policies, et cetera. Just because apparently so many workers in the tech field are immigrants and on visas and things like that.
Yeah, I see. I see. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot that can be done. I think that's one of the things that's always made New York in particular so unique is, the Statue of Liberty and how that's been assigned where, anyone can be able to come here and have an opportunity to be able to build a better life for themselves. And if that's the message that we want to continue, we should be projecting to the world. It can't be come here, but you're not really going to have the opportunities, to be able to do well. So to the extent that we can figure out ways that we can be able to bring folks, especially like out of the shadows, as they say sometimes, so that they can be able to get some of the benefits that are out here, can be able to participate in, some of these larger conversations and how we're all being governed. That's an important thing. I think that, it may be time, this is, really more on the federal level, but figure out ways that individuals who are in tech in other countries who are doing some really amazing things, can be brought here to be able to help with being able to create, different, technologies that are going to impact the lives of everybody. So, I just like anything else, and I think this has kind of been a common theme as we were speaking, is, there are solutions to a lot of these answers. We just have to think strategically and thoughtfully about the ways that we have the right protections are needed, or in protecting the fact that, and I guess really when I say protection, I'm really thinking more from the last question, but, we want to make sure that there are ways that, we're inviting folks, who are invested in the growth of our city, and making sure it's not just we're focusing on the city growing, but also the people behind it that are making a difference.
One last question. I'm gonna go a little over time. Jason, I could do this all day.
No problem.
There's been a few questions here also about the role of technology in a variety of different sort of like legacy industries, right? Real estate, et cetera. But I wonder if you could just comment a little bit on, you touched on a little bit about the health and medical fields, because that seems to have really, we talked a little bit before about on the pandemic, but that seems to be a huge area of innovation these days.
Yeah. And, I think that, just looking at where we are today and where we were, 1 or 2 years ago, the fact that technology has played a role in, innovation, and figuring out ways that we can be able to get a vaccine or get booster shots or what have you. I know both of us, and I'm blanking on it, I think it was 9 months, but we were at a dinner together where we had the new New York City Health Commissioner, and he was talking about the fact that, yes, I think we see the challenges, and, when it comes to trying to figure out a vaccine, but the fact that they were able to go from 0 to a vaccine in what I think it was 9 months, I mean, that's just unheard of, right? Unheard of. And that's the role I think that technology plays, especially when we talk about life sciences. In the mayor's economic blueprint report, and one of the areas that he said that he wants us to be able to invest more in is in life sciences. And there's a lot that's certainly done in Boston, but we have so many terrific academic institutions here that, what if we can figure out ways that we can bridge that gap, where the ways that we figure out solutions or figure out ways to find, cures and treatments for issues that are going to positively impact all our lives, and then figure out ways that we can be able to disseminate that to, all of us, through our hospital system or through others. Or I'm not sure if this is part of the question, but just the fact of just when we talk about consumer health, the fact that, there are online pharmacies today that, we talked about some of the telehealth, when we're talking about some of the, like one of the things we just shared some information on, to start the month, because it's, Mental Health Awareness Month, there are all these apps and technologies out there to make sure that you're protecting your mental health. So there are all these different ways that I think that, we can be able to incorporate technology. And what I'll also say is that we probably have to make more investments, and this probably goes to the infrastructure part that we we're talking about before, but in our actual hospitals, so that we're updating the actual technology that they have, so they're giving accurate readouts, so they're able to help the right amount of people, so that if we start to see flare-ups and whatever, knock on wood, comes next, in the future, that we're prepared for them. So I think in a lot of ways, if there's another lesson that we learned from this pandemic, is that how can we say, like you said, hope is not a strategy. How can we make sure that we're prepared for what comes next? And I think a lot of that comes to making sure that we're investing more in medicine and investing more in our hospital and healthcare system.
You're spot on. And we didn't even get into the whole thing about life sciences, and that also has explosive potential. So we're out of time. Jason, I can't thank you enough. I've learned so much. We could probably speak on this for hours.
Yes.
So much to cover. I had like 10 more questions that I was like dying to ask you, but we ran out of time. Sure. But I want to thank you again.
No,
very
and
excited.
thanks so much for having me. And of course, happy to help do this again or figure out ways that we can provide more resources. And if there are any questions that we didn't get to or that you had, happy to, if you send them over, that, we could send some answers to them. So there's a lot there, but I'm just really glad that you're doing this, because I think when it comes to finding answers to issues and challenges, it comes from all of us. And, series like this, breeds, conversation.
Yeah, I'm gonna probably take you up on a round two. And I would just encourage everybody listening to go to the TechNYC website and consider joining. We do a lot of great stuff. Please support them. I have so many takeaways. The biggest sort of overall theme is that we're just scratching the surface on the scale of the tech industry and what tech can do to help people. That to me is what it's all about, improve quality of life for everybody. And I wish we could really spend more time on that. And that tech will lead the way for economic growth and commercial office leasing, and that every company really, and nonprofit and institution really needs to think about the technology disruption, potential of disruption, right? I mean, not in a Death Star type of way. But the reality is 20 years ago, my favorite days were going to Tower Records to go buy, or 3 years ago, I can't remember, go buy a tape, then, at night, go with my then girlfriend, now wife, and just go to Blockbuster and rent a video and, hang out. Today you get all that stuff on your phone with flashlights and alarm clocks, banking and everything else. It's really moving so fast, and good that we're planning on it. So Jason, thank you again. And finally, I just want to end by thanking my colleagues also at Capalino, in particular our CEO and founder, Jim Capalino, who I know is on the line, and our amazing head of marketing, Lindsay Harwood, who pulled this all together. Thank you so much. And I want to thank our audience for taking the time today again, and look for additional announcements on the future of New York webinars. Jason, thank you so much.
No,
really
thank you, Travis.
And look forward to speaking more.
All right. Take care.
All right, everyone. Have a good time. Take care.